Hi, and welcome to our session. I am Bruce Guptill, co-founder and chief strategist for research and analysis company Addressable Markets, LLC. And I will be using the next 20 or 30 minutes or so to walk you through what I think of as a very fun topic, one that lies at the core of every successful IT project: implementation, acquisition, adaptation, the business cases that we need to develop, and of course, the budgeting that we need. Now, a couple of spoiler alerts. There is almost nothing in what I'm about to talk about that's entirely new. And the slides will contain the answers. In fact, you'll get the answer to the question, what does this do? And how do we explain complex IT for fun and profit within the first few pages? The rest, well, it's mostly entertaining examples of how things get done, how they get done properly and improperly, a little bit of data regarding how we can improve things and the scope of improvement available to us, and most importantly, reinforcement of the answer, the core messages. One other little spoiler alert: I approach these kinds of presentations as someone sitting through them. So text bullets, a lot of text, a little text, but a lot of illustrations, symbols. When I'm sitting in your spot, that doesn't help me out as much as good notes about what it is this thing is about. So I present in an outline kind of form that I hope provides you with the notes that you need. But for the purists, there are a couple of pictures, and we'll get to those momentarily. So let's explore the question. What does this thing do? How do we explore? How do we explain complex IT for fun and profit? Of course, this comes from the background of being an IT analyst. I've also worked on the buy side. I have run IT organizations, and I've been a marketer and salesperson for IT business software organizations. And what I have found, and what the data that my firm, Addressable Markets, keeps coming up with, is you got a better or worse, it depends, but you got between a 40 and 66% shot at actually getting your project to pay itself back. All right, between 40% and 66%, 2/3 of IT projects at the enterprise level still end in partial or total failure. Rather than define failure, we'll define success. Success is defined as shareholder satisfaction or a return of your original investment. And so the majority of these projects don't deliver that. The 40% actually comes from our research. We've done a lot of reviews of industry articles, reports, posts, presentations, obviously working with many clients and provider side clients over the decades. And the 40% is a lot better than it used to be. Just about 4 or 5 years ago, it was around 70-75%. The 66% failure rate comes from a terrific organization called the Standish Group. And they put out a really cool report every year called CHAOS, capital CHAOS, CHAOS. This is from their 2020 report, and it's based on their analysis of more than 50,000 enterprise IT projects around the world. And they're finding even a greater rate of failure than we're finding. The failure rate on the IT startup side, pretty widely available data out there as well. We've got data from Harvard Business Review, Inc. Magazine, Bloomberg, the US Department of Commerce, and a lot of work with investment firms and startups as well. The bottom line is, as the headline says, significant IT investments don't look like a great investment. Now, why is this? Why are we not getting better returns? Well, you can see from the second bullet here, that's the key. We're not understanding, or we're not, as salespeople, as IT leaders, as business leaders, we're not really very good still at getting the buyers and the users and those who are paying for everything to understand what's the intended benefit from this, especially at the user level. Now, this may seem like a big generalization, and it kind of is. There are some firms in some cases that do this very, very well, but even when it's done, it's not done as well as it should be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 40 to 66% failure rates. Now, my insights come from, as I mentioned before, 3 decades as an industry analyst, a marketer, a business strategist, a salesperson. I've developed dozens of buyer's guides and magic quadrants, adoption waves, working for companies like Gartner, IDG, Saugatuck Technology. I currently work with a couple of firms, including Information Services Group, on their regional and quadrant studies as well. And we see the same challenges, the same problems over and over again. We're not doing a good enough job of, first off, understanding, and secondly, translating that understanding to those who are using or whom we want to use the services, the technology, the IT. The first major IT investor I ever worked with 30-something years ago was a gentleman named Jim Clark. Jim co-founded a terrific company called Silicon Graphics. And if you do anything with any kind of computer graphics these days, especially the advanced workstation types of stuff, including the advanced Macs, you can thank Jim and Silicon Graphics for their pioneering work. Jim was also the lead investor, the startup guy behind Netscape, the original full-service internet browser back in the mid-1990s. He was a master at delivering a business vision of IT, even when that vision was still kind of theoretical. And what he told me then is very, very true, but still the same issues recur even after all these years. The providers, the vendors, the IT leaders, the business leaders, the ones that tend to be perceived as real leaders and who experience the greatest levels and recurring instances of success in their projects tend to be those that can walk through very easily how IT is developed, how it is then acquired and adopted, and how it's adapted within the use context to improve what gets done and by whom, but also to explain what additional value can be created, what additional value can be enabled, and why. And that's where we tend to fall down at explaining complex IT for profit and for fun. The best explanations, it turns out, don't really talk much about the technology itself. Again, I've spent all these years talking with IT providers and organizations and finance organizations within enterprises, procurement and services and HR and whomever. And when it comes to explaining IT and when it comes to positioning vendors, providers, solutions, and services in any of these studies that I've helped develop or worked on over the decades, the technology is important, but frankly, especially from the analyst side, we don't really care that much about the technologies. A lot of it's very, very cool. Don't get me wrong. And I am a gadget geek going back decades. And there are some amazing things out there and awesome capabilities and possibilities. And of course, it's a very, very strong positive when the solutions and services that we need to buy and use include the best and most effective technologies. But the best explanations of business IT really shouldn't talk much about the IT itself. The best explanations should describe how the technology gets used to improve people and systems work. That's it. That's your answer. That's how you explain complex IT for profit, for fun, or for anything else that you want to gain out of it. Don't focus on the technology. Focus on how it improves things. The best explanations are all about how things get improved. And I'm going to harp on that for a few minutes. But if you can't explain that, if you can't explain how buying or using or delivering or adapting this helps what it is that we do in the context, in the terminology of the people and systems using it, well, the technology itself doesn't have very much value, and the explanation certainly doesn't have enough value. And this is the problem. We have really begun over the last generation to 2 generations. We celebrate technology. The next big thing has become such a massive part of our individual psyches that we have technology itself being presented as a benefit. And we tend to understand that and believe it a little bit too much. Technology itself is not the benefit. Technology itself is not the savior. We spend at Addressable Markets a tremendous amount of time, most of our time, assessing market opportunity for the technology developers, the vendors, the services providers. So we spend a tremendous amount of time, hours every day, months out of every year, with ongoing research and analysis programs that evaluate a huge range of behavior, the marketing, sales campaigns, and so much tends to focus still on technology. Even the case studies that we get, and case studies, user studies, these are awesome and they're fantastic, but they tend to emphasize technology being used. And they tend to emphasize short-term improvements, cost reduction, productivity improvements, or perhaps a lot of enablement. And that's great. What can we change now? How can we improve right now? But what about next year? And what about the year after that? Yes, the vendors and providers and our own IT organizations do address these questions, but not adequately enough to make us understand this and want to use it. Again, if you think that they do, I refer you back to those failure percentages. Between 40 and 66% of projects continue to fail, to not satisfy what it is the users need, expect, or demand. And that's a lot because they still emphasize this potential, the potential of the tech and the provider, which, is okay. And the use cases abound. There's a lot of use cases about what gets done and what can be done. It's an awesome trend, actually, these days among vendors and services providers, software platform providers, et cetera, to emphasize business improvement and to link their costs and their pricing to business outcomes. That is a fantastic step that has been needed for a long time, and more vendors and providers are going in that direction. But it's still a minority of instances. I review hundreds of providers in dozens of markets on an annual basis, and those that link pricing to business outcomes and who are able to work with the businesses to define those outcomes accurately is still in the minority. And relatively few provide enough insights. And this isn't just picking on the providers and the vendors. This is in our own IT and business organizations as well, because we lionize the technology. So relatively few actually focus on how to realize the value, right? It was realized, it was delivered. How? And what are the next steps in how? Too much of what we see is really functionally focused, technology focused, very tactically right now focused. And I get it. It makes sense because we have to justify the costs, the expenses, the resource requirements and allocations, the management, and any other changes that we might need to implement for significant projects or even most of the minor projects. But what about next year? And what about the year after that? We need to be able to explain technology, to explain complex IT, so that it shows how things improve now, but also how we're not getting locked in to what it is we're doing now. Because we know the last couple of years have shown better than anything in my generation. The last couple of years have shown how many things can change, how quickly, and how that cascades throughout business and technology. So we have to emphasize how to realize the value, all right? How to realize the value that technology can and does deliver. Unfortunately, the technology itself, as I alluded to a few minutes ago, the technology itself tends to be positioned as both the answer and the differentiator. Almost any kind of firm that uses technology, let alone sells or supports it, loves to talk about the technologies in their portfolios, in their environments. And actually, it doesn't really matter what kind of business you're in anymore. You're going to emphasize your technology. Have you seen a car ad recently? Or for advertising for banks? Coffee chains masquerading as technology firms. We emphasize the technology. It's something that we think or we know that people like to think about, but we don't emphasize, again, how this actually makes things better. And well, I'll leave the rest of that phrase for later because it's a really cool phrase and I want you to look forward to it. But technology itself, too often used or seen as a differentiator. What technology is a tool. And I want you to think about rock. When you're thinking about technology, if you want to explain a technology, if you want to conceive as to what technology really is, picture a rock. It's expected that you're going to have certain tools, capabilities in your portfolio, in your services, in your product or whatever. But the technology itself is basically a rock. It sits there. It does nothing until it's properly implemented. And it can only do so much until it's properly adapted. Let's get into adaptation and innovation in a bit. But first, I want to emphasize the best technology often, almost usually, fails to dominate or even compete for long periods of time. That's because there's no such thing as a sustainable technological advantage in today's markets. Now, some folks are saying, yes, but our rocks are different. Our technology is this or that or whatever. Nope, sorry. There is no way, absent some kind of monopolistic enforcement, there's a substitution for almost every business IT you can think of that already exists or that will exist. Or there's a sublimation, right? It will get sublimated into other things because the technology itself is a great piece of what it is we need to do. If you take a look at the logos and the other things that are on this slide, each one of these was the best technology available and had a short period of time, in some cases shorter than others, as the market leader, not necessarily a first mover. Don't get me into first movers. First movers rarely sustain their success. But, Sony Betamax, for those of you from a certain generation, may recall the Betamax came to market as like the be all and end all of videotape recording for consumers and for videotaped entertainment suppliers. Well, it turns out it was great stuff. And the VHS standard became a lot cheaper to use, to manufacture and distribute, and easier to support. Hence, Betamax sort of went away, and it was very costly for Sony. I mentioned Netscape before. There were other browsers before but Netscape brought all of the Mosaic technology that had been developed. Was it the University of Chicago or University of Illinois? I forget. I'm sorry. And they had terrific backing, lots of money, massive technologist base behind it. And then Microsoft said, we can do that and we can bundle it into what we already sell with our universally accepted operating system and productivity software. And boom, there went Netscape. A lot of what they did was sublimated by Microsoft and others, Google into the Chrome browser, for example. But Netscape's not around anymore, and they actually didn't last more than a few years overall. One other that I want to talk about, I won't spend too much time on all of these things. TiVo, cute little TiVo, revolutionized the television/video entertainment industry in a lot of ways. The idea that we could watch and record digitally at the same time and pause and resume or go back or go forward, and we could do it in real time. That was awesome. But if you look around, nobody refers to TiVo anymore because this is part of the streaming services. This has been subsumed by every digital DVR that comes to you through any of the streaming aggregators like a Hulu or a Fubo, for example, or YouTube TV, and of course through your cable company as well. So it's great technology. It was really pioneering and market leading, but it got subsumed, and it happens pretty quickly. Now, patents, copyrights, other kinds of trade agreements or technology standardizations and things like that, they can help protect what it is that we develop and bring to market. They can classify our really, really cool rocks as really, really cool, and you can't do the same thing that we're doing with this rock. All right. But by the time most of the legal challenges are resolved, the value of the rock is usually declined, or again, it's been worked around. So the technology itself, the rock, isn't worth as much as it was. And the larger market has moved on to the next big thing. In a lot of cases, again, because your technology has been subsumed into the next big thing, or it's been frozen in time while other applications of the technology continue to evolve. And I know I'm lecturing, and I'll try not to do it so much for the rest of our session. There's one other corollary that I want to bring up, though, and this is one that we run into a lot. We ask users, we ask departments, what's innovative about what you're doing? Well, we have this technology. We ask developers and we ask vendors and so on, what's innovative about your organization, about your company? Well, we have this technology. That's not innovative. The rock is not an innovation. All right. Technology is not innovation. Innovation comes from how we use the technology to do things better and to do better things. All right. The fact that you have or use a technology is not an innovation. It may be innovative in your business because you have not done it or used it before, but even then, it's not truly an innovation if you just have it or use it. It's how. And I've been beating that little drum since the beginning of this session. It's about how we use the technology to do things better and to do better things. How we can and do both adopt and adapt to our needs. That's where the innovation lies. And that's where the explanation really needs to begin and focus. Now, if you have a rock, you can do a lot of things with the rock. The rock itself can be used as a tool, as a weapon. It can be used as a tool in a huge range of circumstances, but you're not really adding any value to it. It's not innovative. How the people, the users, the organizations use the rock, that's innovative. So if you want to keep up and stay ahead of what your users are doing, if you want to be able to lead your users into utilizing the technology better, come up with different ways to adapt the rock. All right. In this case, we can actually literally leverage the rock, but we can make it into a hammer, an axe, a weapon, a plow. There's so many things that we can do if we think about what it is we need to do with the rock and then adapt the rock, shape it, if you will, into a more functionally appropriate format. We can then shape it even more. We can increase not only our ability to use the rock, but what the rock can do by further refining it and adapting it to more and different purposes. It's the same technology. It's still a rock, but we can adapt it, we can improve it, and we can continue to both improve and adapt it to improve and adapt what we're doing business-wise, organizationally, and so on. That's where the explanation needs to focus. not on the tech, not on the IT. But if you really want to explain complex IT so that people will buy it and use it and continue to use it and improve what it is they do with it, you have to focus on how it gets adopted and adapted to accomplish and improve necessary functionality and to enable more improvement. How can we further reshape the rock? How can we further adapt what it is we're doing with the rock and how we do it? If you can't explain that, if you can't explain how the technology improves what gets done in your business, in your context, and you probably shouldn't be using the technology, or at the worst, or the best, I should say, you're not getting your money's worth out of the technology. And here's a little piece of data that I didn't include in the slides. We have found over the last 10 years that when technology is adequately explained, I can't adequately speak, when the technology, the value of the technology and how it can be not only utilized, but why, and then how it can be adapted and further utilized in more ways, when those types of explanations are delivered and understood, user satisfaction goes up, the utilization of the technology goes up, the cost of using the technology, especially in support and training, goes way down. And typically enterprises indicate at least a 10% improvement in the overall success rates, meaning you've got a 10% better chance at least of making your money back and improving your overall opportunity and improving your not just your costs, but your outcomes of whatever the project is. At least a 10% increase. And that tends to repeat year over year over year for between 3 to 5 years. So think of an automatic 10% improvement or return on your investment for 3 to 5 years. That's going to make those original numbers look a lot better, a lot more quickly. So again, if you clearly explain and emphasize how well we can use any technology to make things better, people are going to listen. You've got a real story that people will not only pay attention to, but will continue to benefit from. So we can get more funding, we can get better funding, we can get leadership, shareholder, worker, user buy-in, partner buy-in, and we can more easily find more ways to improve what it is that we do and how we do it. So our chances of staying in business and being in business and adapting to what goes on in the marketplaces is vastly improved. So the most effective cases also account for how the technology gets adapted into innovative ways of working. That requires understanding how the work gets done, something that too often gets missed when we're evaluating and explaining technology for business. But the bottom line is, our answer is a question, or two questions really. How can the technology be used to improve how people and systems work? And how can it be used to do things better and to do better things? This is true everything from agile development to industry-specific functional operations to automation to services provision, you name it. To reiterate one more time, if you cannot explain with examples how a technology improves what gets done in your business context, you shouldn't be using that technology, or at the very best, as I said, you're paying too much and your likelihood of success with a specific technology or technology focused projects will not be good. Now you'll see improvements if you can do this, and you can see improvements in risk management, overall cost, time to value, speed of operations, the volume of what it is that you can do or should be doing or might be doing, overall productivity, better control over things, even relationships. But it's how to do things better and how to do better things. How to take that rock and utilize the rock. And again, the technology can be utilized very, very simply in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. But where we adapt it And then where we reshape it and how really influences what happens with what gets done. It enables us to adapt, to truly innovate, and then to go forward into the next generation that we probably can't see too well right now. But again, if we're not doing this, if we're not able to say this is how we do it to improve how things work, how we do things better and how to do better things, what we have left is just the technology. It's just a rock. That's not how we're going to get our money's worth out of these things. And it's not how we are going to succeed. We want it to be more than a rock. We need to explain that how things get better and why, and how we can do better things as well. I want to thank you all for your participation and attention to this session. A lot of fun putting it together and probably even more fun delivering it. My contact information is on this last slide, and would love to follow up with anybody. And I know that a copy of this session presentation, including this PowerPoint, will be made available by our friends at eCore. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks again to the team for inviting me to present and participate, and I look forward to speaking with everyone soon.